Hey everybody, this is my 20-gallon open-topped angelfish tank, and this is my dead Farlowella catfish. So we got to shoot a video that I really don't want to shoot, but we're going to shoot it anyway. So let's talk about cause and effect.
And the reason I don't want to do this video is because I just did a treatment with chemiclean on this tank, and it complicates what would otherwise be a fairly cut and dry I've got a dead fish video. And the part that makes it complicated is I myself don't really know what the answer is. So today we're going to talk about cause and effect, because I get a lot of comments from people that seem to make strange associations to me. But I find that as humans, as a species, we feel like we need to know the reason things happen. We see something happen, something must have caused it to happen. Even babies sort of catch on to that idea fairly early. So it seems to be pretty much inherent within us. In fact, if you look at our history, we will believe all sorts of nonsense just to have some sort of explanation for why volcanoes erupt or why there's lightning or whatever. We just need to have this reason. And so it's really easy to jump to the conclusion that I did this chemiclean treatment, and for those of you who follow along, I really did an overdose of a treatment. I did like 3 times the amount of chemiclean you're supposed to put in there, and shot the video with the intention of showing, like, look, I do this all the time, it's not a big deal, it never harms your fish. And then of course the next day I have a fish that's behaving funny, and the day after that it was dead. And so again, my mind went immediately to, you did the chemiclean treatment, you've got this dead fish, what's going on here? Is there a correlation? And it might be, and that's, again, this is why I don't like shooting these kind of videos, because I don't know if there's a correlation or not. So here's what I do kind of know about chemiclean. I believe it is a form of erythromycin. I'm not 100% positive about that, but I'm pretty sure it's a form of erythromycin. As such, it's going to behave like erythromycin regardless of what form of erythromycin it is. So it's basically just sort of an antibiotic or something in that nature. And that's not really something that's usually dangerous in slightly larger than normal doses. The packaging says that it oxidizes the sludge and the organic material out of your tank. So again, the only harm in that would be sucking the oxygen out of the water. That certainly wasn't what was going on in this particular case. In fact, I had such a vigorous air stone in there that my initial thought was well, let me back up for a moment. For the last several weeks, this whiptail has been sitting in the water with its nose sticking a full 1/4 inch, maybe 1/2 centimeter out of the water. And it seems kind of odd to me that a fish would deliberately leave part of its body out of the water where it could dry out. Now, I've been told that it wouldn't really dry out because of the wick effect and the moisture at the surface and all that. But over time, the tip of the fish's nose did sort of turn white. So even when it was back underwater, it still looked funny. It still had this sort of white tip on the end of its nose from being spent out of the water, I guess, or something. I don't know. I also want to point out that I've never been able to keep a whiptail catfish alive for more than maybe 6 to 9 months, with the exception of this one. This is the longest lived whiptail catfish I've ever had. I've tried maybe 5 or 6 of them over the years, and again, I've never had one go more than 6 to maybe 9 months tops. This one was well over a year old now, and so I was already kind of surprised that it lived as long as it did. I don't know why they don't really seem to take in my water, but they don't seem to take in my water. So I've already got a fish that's questionable, it might have been ill, and then I did this big treatment. So could it have had an effect? It certainly could have. It could have contributed to what was going on, but I can't find anything that would indicate that a little bit too much chemiclean would actually kill the fish or do any real damage to it. Again, the airstone thing is the only thing that I can think of about chemiclean that would make this a dangerous situation. If you put chemiclean or ultralife, it's another very similar product. It works the same way. For all I know, it could be the same chemical compound. they suck the oxygen out of the tank. So if you don't have a really good, vigorous air stone, you can lose fish because of oxygen deprivation. The only other time I've ever lost a fish during a chemiclean treatment was one time when I didn't put an air stone in the tank. The water was about that much below the hang on the back filter, so I had this sort of waterfall effect. It was bubbling water into the tank. And I thought that's plenty of circulation and aeration, gas exchange and all that. And the next morning I had 2 or 3 dead fish in the tank. And so after that, I always put an air stone in the tank and never had a problem since. I never had a problem before doing that. I only had the problem when I didn't use the air stone. I had 2 or 3 fish die, and then I never had a problem again until this particular fish died after doing the chemiclean use. So after I put this huge, like, triple dose of chemiclean in, the next morning I came down, and instead of sitting way up at the top of the water with its nose sticking out, it was down on the bottom, which is really unusual for this fish. I've never seen it down on the bottom. Even during water changes, it doesn't get on the bottom of the tank. It goes lower, but it always hangs in this sort of vertical position. It never lays on the bottom. So that was alarm bells right there when I came down and saw that. My first thought was chemiclean. I put this huge dose and now look. My next thought was, well, I've got this air stone that makes the tank look like a boiling cauldron. I mean, my poor angelfish was cowering in the corner. So I thought, well, you know, maybe this fish doesn't like all that vigorous activity at the surface, and maybe that's why it's at the bottom. So I put a more reasonable size air stone in the tank, and I even did a 5-gallon water change the following day from the initial treatment. This is now the next morning. I find the fish on the bottom. So by that afternoon, I come back in, I'd done a water change, I got a lot of the dead, mulm and all that kind of stuff from the treatment. It works really fast, and so I already had a lot of dead cyanobacteria in the tank. I removed that, topped the water back off, and then left it alone and left it overnight with the lower air stone, thinking that the fish would go back up to its normal spot. And it didn't. The next morning when I came down, it was dead. And so I don't know why. I really don't. I've thought about it and I've thought about it. And again, may the chemiclean have impacted its health or something? It might have or something. I don't know. But I really don't think it did. Now, I want to make it perfectly clear to you, my viewer, I am not recommending that you go beyond what it says on the labeling. You follow what it says on the label. Don't blame me if your fish die. You do what it says on the label. I'm speaking for what I do and from my experience, and that's it. You do what it says on the label. If you don't do what it says on the label, then don't blame me if your fish dies or your aquarium leaks or anything else. Because that's where we get into this cause and effect kind of thing. I've had some really strange comments over the years. I did this and 2 days later my fish died. It always reminds me of my days when I was a teenager a million years ago. I was a parts runner in the auto parts industry, and everybody had stories about this particular customer, the customer that came in and complained that, I got my windshield wipers changed last week and now I had a flat tire when I woke up this morning. Are you going to pay for my towing? Or I got an oil change and now my brakes are squeaking. Are you going to fix my brakes for me? So I've had experience my whole life with people coming up with these really strange cause and effects. I've had people tell me with the silicone number 2, I patched the tank with silicone number 2, and then a week later I had 2 dead fish, and instantly they're blaming it on the silicone number 2. Just because one thing happens and then something else doesn't happen does not mean there is a direct correlation from one to the other. In this particular case, it does even to me seem really, really coincidental that the morning after I put a really big dose of chemiclean in the tank, the fish was on the bottom of the tank and very much ill. But I'd already been seeing it act funny. I even mentioned it in a couple of videos. That's why I've had, I said some people commented about it, because I had mentioned it was unusual behavior that I was already noticing in this fish. So I don't know, again, I don't really know what to make of that, but I did lose that fish. It was right after I did the huge chemiclean treatment. So if you want to say, well, come on, dude, it's got to be that, you're entitled to say that. I'm not going to argue with you if you want to say that. I personally still don't believe it. I really don't. I've looked and looked and looked, and I just can't find or think of anything about a chemiclean treatment that would have caused that fish to die. In fact, I'm so confident that it wasn't that I've since done another big double dose of, I'm still continuing on Again, if you watch that original video, the whole purpose of this was to just slam this tank and really knock this cyanobacteria out of there. This is just a problem tank for me. I always have tons of cyanobacteria in this tank, and I'm really just going to slam it out of there once and for good, hopefully. And so I'm confident enough that, you know, I flushed that fish down the toilet this morning and then came in and I put 2 more big, well-rounded scoops. You know, I probably did another double dose on top of it. Still hasn't even been 48 hours from my first dose. So I'm not concerned about it. I've treated tanks like that with chemiclean. I've treated that tank with chemiclean I don't know how many times in the past, with that fish in the tank. And I've never had problems before. And now suddenly this one time, you know, all of a sudden I've got a fish that dies, and suspiciously it was a fish that I've been kind of scratching my head about its behavior over the last couple of weeks anyway. So again, you know, did maybe the chemiclean push it over the edge? I'm not going to argue with that. I'll even say maybe, probably, you know, but again, I really don't think that I need to recant my statements the other day about the chemiclean and being safe to like double up like that. Again, I'm going to tell you, follow the instructions, do what it says on the packaging, and don't blame me if you have any problems if you don't follow what it does on the packaging. This is me, my experience, and as you just saw, I had a fish die. So, you know, again, if you want to believe that, you know, it's obvious what's going on here, you know, you can go ahead and believe that, but I really don't think it was the chemiclean that killed that fish, at least not outright. Anyway, that's all I can think of to say about that. So I'll be really interested to hear what your comments are down below. Again, this is going to be one of those, you know, everybody's going to have their own opinion, and none of us are going to get a cut and dry answer. You know, so whatever your opinion is, that's just going to be what it is. I'll read it, but I'm not going to argue with you about it because we'll never have any way of knowing. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you're subscribed. You never know what you're going to miss. And this tank behind me here is my 125-gallon tank, which is not currently under treatment for anything. So thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.